Hi, everyone. So today we're interviewing the National Association of Black Accountants. So first, can you guys introduce yourselves and then maybe talk a little bit about what NABA does and who you guys are?
I'll start. Hi, I'm Maria Espinoza. I'm a rising junior at Villanova, accounting and finance major, and I'm the current president of NABA. And if the rest of you guys want to introduce yourself, I can talk a little bit about NABA after that.
I'm Franklin Peaker, rising junior, accounting and finance major, and I'm the vice president of NABA.
Hello, I'm Jordan Francis. I'm a rising junior. I'm the script chair of NABA. I'm also an accounting and finance major with a minor in business law.
Hi everyone, I'm Chi. I'm a rising senior, majoring in finance. I'm the founding president of NABA.
Yeah, so NABA stands for the National Association for Black Accountants, but it's much more than that. It's an inclusive organization where students of color in the business school have a space to kind of form friendships and form the relationships needed to kind of have a good experience in the business school while also giving them resources to succeed, such as tutoring. And we actually had an opportunity to go to a conference in Baltimore last year. So just all of that kind of making it a great experience for students of color, regardless if you're an accounting major or not. We just want to provide a space for students in the business school to feel heard and feel like they can make friendships in the business school.
I think as the founding president, one of my motives for starting an organization like this within VSB, I think stemmed out of the need to create this social environment for specifically for students of color, because in my experience, at least, I noticed that we just didn't have that, social backbone within VSB. And so I created it as an opportunity for us, to get to know each other, to grant us resources, to do well academically, get great internships, but at the same time, form great friendships and form great bonds so that, again, like to what Maria said, it's a productive and, pleasant experience with students who go through VSB.
So the purpose of this interview today is to give groups around campus a platform to talk about the issues of racism and diversity from the perspective of Villanovans. And hopefully we can try to put together some things that maybe the school community can do to help solve some of these issues that we have on campus. And we'll discuss exactly like what the issues that we see are. And what we can do about it and what the school administration can do about it. So the first question that we have is, how does your organization help students who might otherwise feel marginalized at Villanova given its demographics?
Yes, I can speak about that. Well, speaking from personal experience, going into the business school, automatically you don't see much people who look like me or that are of a different kind of background. So first, it's difficult already to kind of feel like you fit in because automatically you feel like physically you don't. But I feel like when it comes to my experience, I didn't have that many friends in the business school. All my friends were kind of outside the business school, and I didn't have that kind of when people start picking what classes to pick and they have, oh, your friends are in this. And when it comes to group projects, you are in a classroom with people that you know. I kind of didn't have that experience like right away. So I think that's what NABA is here for. NABA is so that a lot of people in the business school that are students of color can get to know each other early on so that we can have a good experience and we can have friendships and also connections in the business school as well.
I think just to speak to that a little bit, so again, speaking to my experience coming into VSB, I'm an international student, so I came from Nigeria and literally did not know a single soul on the entire campus when I got there. And added to the fact that I'm a Black woman, so coming into the business school again, there is not that many Black women, talk less women who are not from America. So it was a very isolating experience my first couple months because I didn't know anyone. There was no groups I could go to. I didn't feel like I had a support system. So I had to navigate a lot of that process on my own in the beginning. And I mean, I'm grateful that I have a family that everyone's pretty much in business. So I kind of knew what exactly I needed to do coming in. But that's not the experience for a lot of other students. People coming and are confused and literally had no idea what's going on up until like sophomore, junior year, where they finally get their footing. And by then, like, they've missed a lot of opportunities, which if we were properly guided, that would not have happened. So a lot of our goals, moving into this next year, is getting freshmen from very young, setting them on the right pace, like telling them this is what you need to do to set yourself up for success within the business school, to get a great job, because at the end of the day, like, that's one of the main reasons why we go to college, is for the experience, but to graduate with a great job that, like, you get the returns of your investment for paying for college. So that's one of our goals, to just kind of get people young, especially through freshman year, and help them navigate that process, help them navigate picking the right classes, help them navigate picking the right majors, give them mentors, just so that they have a great experience, and like they have the most productive experience that they could have had if they had gone to any other school. And at the same time, back to what Maria said, forming great friendships, people that they meet. And it's also an opportunity to meet alumni of color who graduated through VSB. We have this mentorship program that we're just setting up at the moment with students of color who graduated from VSB like a couple years ago, who are now coming back to give back through our program. So it's just a great way to stay connected with VSB students past and present, and just to kind of keep that momentum going.
Great. Yeah, so that's very important that NABA kind of creates that community for people. Our next question is, do you feel as if there are any barriers that your organization faces when it comes to handling racial issues?
Yeah, I think with that, seeing as though our organization is for minorities, I think one barrier is that a lot of the times we're having conversations with the people who experience these things, with the people who we all go through it, but it's hard to kind of communicate and talk to people about these issues who don't look like us. So I think one barrier is that we're kind of all the ones experiencing these things, and we're not talking to the people who could have the possibility to change these things and need to hear it. So I think definitely that's one barrier.
I guess too, just to expand that a little bit, I think that is as a result of there is no avenue for that discussion to be had. And I guess I can only really speak to the business school because that's where we all are. There is no like class, or there is no social setting where discussions of race and other kinds of injustice and discrimination, there is no opportunity for those discussions to be had. So it's when people see, oh, like NABA, they think, oh, like, this is not for me because I'm not Black, or this is not, or I'm not Hispanic, this is not an issue that affects me. Whereas like we need to be having the conversation where it's like, no, it does affect you, because everyone, like, whether or not you are I guess for lack of a better word, whether or not you are the one perpetuating some sort of discrimination, or you're the victim, like, both parties are affected. And so it's important that we are able to have this conversation so it could be beneficial, and like everyone in society could be a much more socially conscious person. And it's just back to Maria's point, like I think that's one of the big barriers, is why is it only the students of color who recognize that there is a lack of representation of students of color in like VSB, for example, or in corporate America? Like, I've heard conversations like, oh, like VSB is one of the most diverse places I've ever been to. And that's problematic. That like, I don't know the exact percentages, but there is not I'm sure this is everyone's experience. In all my classes, in most of my classes in business school, I was one of like 2 or 1 of 3 Black or people of color in my classroom. But no one else except for me sees that as a problem. And so I think that's where being able to have that discussion, bringing the awareness to everyone else, despite your background, despite your race or your economic background or whatever, bringing everyone into that conversation. So when everyone sees that situation, everyone can see, oh, there is a problem here. Because I think that's one of the issues. People are not seeing that there is a problem.
Do you guys feel like your organization receives the same treatment as other organizations on campus, and why or why not?
So when you say treatment, like, what exactly do you mean? Do you mean in terms of like funding, or like the perception? Could you explain that question a little bit more?
Well, I think what we were trying to get at is more like, how do you think the school like views your organization in comparison to others? Like, do you think you guys feel valued at the school as an organization?
I think, so again, speaking within the business school, because that's where this organization is primarily located, I think 100%, like VSB values this organization, because I think in recent years, they definitely have recognized that there is a problem. Like there's a very poor representation of students from different backgrounds. And so like, I remember starting out this organization with two of my other friends, Nas and Greg, and I had the discussion with the dean, with some members of like the deans of the business school, and like they were all fully supportive. And I guess too, an organization like this is very in line with the diversity, equity, inclusion goals for the business school for the next couple of years. So we've had immense support. Like we have been involved in conversations as it relates to the strategic plan for business school, for VSB as it relates to equity and inclusion again. So I haven't seen any kind of like backlash or hesitation or reluctance from the school's perspective as to like what we're trying to do and the things that we're trying to achieve. That's not been the case at all. They've always asked for our suggestions. They've always asked for feedback. You know, how can they make things better? So I think that's been, because again, like when I started this, I was kind of nervous that I envisioned that would be a problem, that I would get some reluctance on the side of the school, but that's completely been the opposite. Super supportive since this organization kicked off. And again, I think it's evident to see that, like, you know, like the people who are in this organization are doing fantastically well within VSB. Like, I guess, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but within VSB, I've interned at some of the most amazing places and like worked at some like companies that not a lot of other students have worked at. So it's obvious that, you know, we are coming from a place of, you know, despite all the things we're going through, we're still being successful, and we're just asking for like we're asking to make our experience just easier. That's, I think, and again, like there has been no kind of reluctance to those discussions. They've always been pretty open. Like I have a really good relationships with the deans of the business school, and they're always ready to listen whenever I have something to say.
Okay, that's great that you feel that the VSB supports your group. What about from like the student perspective? Would you guys say that you guys are like valued by the student body?
It's difficult to say, but I'm going to talk based on my perspective and based on some conversations I've had. I think there probably are some students that don't understand why an organization like this exists within VSB, and that again goes back to one of the questions we asked us previously. They are not aware of, like, they don't see that there's a problem in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within VSB, because I guess they're on the like they're within the majority. So it's like, oh, like everything seems fine, like in my opinion. And so to that end, I think there's some disconnect in terms of like how they receive us. Obviously, the students of color who have come to VSB like see us and like are so grateful. Like I remember last year during the VSB Society Fair, a freshman girl, she's been there for like 2 or 3 weeks, and she's also Black, and she walked up and she's like, "You have no idea what it means seeing you here. I felt so lost these past couple of weeks." So we have gotten that kind of feedback from students of color, but I will say that non-students of color, like some of them do not understand why our organization needs to exist within VSB, and they don't understand the differences in the experiences of students of color within VSB. Because I mean, for a lot of them, they're like, oh no, VSB, like if you ask, like they probably say VSB is like the most fantastic place, like it's this and that and that. I mean, which it is, but again, some students are having a very different experience from that. And our organization quickly, we recognize that because, you know, we are some of those people who have just had a different experience from that of the majority of the students there. So to that end, I think like some students definitely don't see the value of an organization like this. And again, I don't think that's necessarily something that's unique to Villanova. Like I think it's unique to the discourse generally around race in America. Like some people just don't see the need of, they're like, no, treat everyone equally. If you want to have an organization like this, like everyone should be allowed to get in or whatever. So it's just, you know, trying to navigate that and trying to, you know, and again, us too, like we anticipate that. Like we know that some people will not understand why this organization exists. So it's, I think one thing VSB can do a better job of is creating those avenues, creating those opportunities where discussions around the real, like the struggles of people of color, people of difference, the struggles that they go through in these predominantly white spaces, and how people can have a better experience overall.
So we've discussed a larger problem that we see at Villanova, specifically VSB. But have you experienced or heard any specific incidents at Villanova involving racism or where race was an issue?
I'll take that question. And then, anybody else could speak to it. I think I've most definitely heard of incidents, even before coming to Villanova, you kind of hear about the stories. I'm from Philadelphia, so inner city schools are, definitely more diverse. And, you would think more people from the city would go to Villanova, but, they don't. And, you might ask, why is that? And it's because you hear some of those horror stories before you even go to the school. And, luckily, while I've been here, I haven't experienced anything egregious, just more so casual racism, things such as, people, maybe, my white counterparts feel a little bit too comfortable to say the N-word around me and stuff like that. But nothing egregious. But, other students of color haven't, been so lucky. They've experienced, being shunned by their peers, and, they've experienced, racism from their teachers and stuff like that. And so there's even though racism might not be so upfront, some of it is very subtle and it's very casual and it's very, you can feel it instead of more so see it.
I think too, just to add more to what Franklin said, it's even something as little as I've asked this to many of my friends in VSP because I thought it was an experience unique to just me. For example, in most of my classes, I usually always sit in front in my VSP classes or actually my class generally because I can't really see properly. And most times you'll find that I would usually sit in front and then no one else sit in that row, but then all the other rows would be filled up. And at first I thought it was just me. I'm oh, maybe no one likes to sit in the front, in the front row. But then I asked all my other friends and they said, no, this is my experience too. And so you begin to ask the question, what's going on? I don't understand why that's the case. And obviously no one has done anything to you, they've not done anything to you, but it's sending a subtle message, whether intentional or unintentional, or even little things. I know for me, coming from Nigeria, when I came to Villanova, again, not just VSB, students I met outside of VSB too in other colleges would say things like, my God, your English is fantastic. But again, it's English is my first language and that's the national language of Nigeria. But the assumption is I should speak some I don't know. It was just fascinating hearing those conversations. I was what? I was so confused. I'm of course, if you did your own research, if you did the job of checking before asking me that question, you would not have to ask me that question at all. So I think it's a social consciousness that I think is missing, and then those actions sometimes can be interpreted as racism. And because it's the victims of those kinds of lack of social, the social unconsciousness. The victims are always students of color or students of any kind of difference that are just different from the majority. So.
And even going off of what Frank was saying, he was talking about casual racism, and just even thinking about that term, it's something that we're all aware of, and it's something that's definitely been ingrained in the university and within America. And just to think that we even have to discuss that casual racism is acceptable in society, and that we have to tolerate it is something that we have. Now we have different platforms with this interview and the Instagram account, Black Villanova, if you're aware of it, where we're able to express different stories that we have. So I think it's a great platform that we have to discuss this.
And going off of that, if you actually look and see and look at Black Villanova, you'll know that racism actually exists on this campus, and it's not like I said, from my experience, it's been a little bit more subtle, more casual. But for other people's experience, it's been worse. It's been upfront. It's been in their face. So it's definitely a thing on campus.
There's been a lot of calls for action by the university. Given the recent murder of George Floyd and other instances of police brutality that have occurred, a lot of people feel like the school needs to do something about it and the overall issues of racism and diversity at the school. So what are some ideas or steps that the university could take to get closer to solving these kinds of issues on campus?
So what I would say is the number one step is to listen to our voice, like listen to Black voices, listen to student of color voices, and actually make us feel heard, and not, don't tell us, that you hear us, like take those actions, take those steps. So like, for instance, VSB doesn't have a diversity requirement. Some of the other schools do. I think the liberal arts school does, but the engineering school doesn't. Stuff like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But diversity is lacking in the school of business. So, and these incidents occur, these casual racist moments occur, and some people aren't educated enough to realize that. And I think I think it's important for, our school to have those type of classes so that they can learn more about that type of stuff and learn more about our experiences. And then, like I said, just listening to our voices and making them feel heard instead of just telling us that, you hear us.
I think to expand a little bit on Franklin's point, I think I feel like it shouldn't even be called a diversity requirement. I think it's in order to work in a company or to work anywhere where you're interacting with people from different backgrounds, you need to have the communication skills to do that. And I think that's what's missing. I think a lot of students don't understand that it's beneficial to you because you know how to build relationships, you know how to exist in a society that's different from what you're used to, and you can interact with people from different backgrounds. And I think especially as the world becomes a much more culturally diverse place, you need to have those skills if you're going to graduate college and enter into a workplace. So it's sometimes there's a disconnect between I don't understand how someone says something like, oh, we need to do this, and then there's backlash about it, because I think it's a basic skill to live in a society, to know how to interact with people from everywhere. So I think, to Franklin's point again, I think there needs to be something done around that, especially for people in the business school, because when most of our work is collaborative. You're working on a team to achieve some goal, working on some project. So I think we could do a better job with regards to that.
Have you ever noticed, on campus specifically, differing treatment between yourself or a student of color that you know? And has this, would this have involved law enforcement or public safety, or maybe even Villanova faculty themselves?
I think I say that a lot of, in terms of public safety, I've had, run-ins for public safety in terms of just where I felt as if it was unnecessary. Sometimes, I'll be walking along campus at night. You might see a public safety car just casually following you. I don't know if, regular, other white students or, really experienced that. Or I remember one time I was a freshman and I was walking to West Campus, never been to West Campus, always on South Campus. And I was looking for one of the dorm halls, I think it was the CLEC. And I went up to a public safety officer and I asked where the CLEC was. And, he gave me some directions. I wasn't really paying attention. I'm not good at taking directions. And so, I kept walking. And that same public safety car pulled up on me while I was walking. And the other pub safety officer, he asked me if I went here. And I'm like, yeah, I go here. I just came up to you and asked you a question. He's like, we're going to need to see ID. And so I show him my wild card, and he tells me, yeah, we just had to check because we had, reports of a suspicious white person, and, we just had to check. And I'm like, I'm not white, and you got reports of a suspicious white person. Why did you check my ID? Especially since I just came up here. And so, I felt, some type of way about that. And, and speaking to other, Black students, you kind of hear similar stories along those terms. And, I don't think, some of our, white counterparts kind of, experience those type of things.
Now, kind of segueing the conversation a bit, do you guys have you guys been involved with the protests or the movement at large outside of campus? And do you think that more people at Villanova should be involved?
I mean, I think
you can go, Chichi.
No, go ahead, Jordan.
Okay. Personally, I haven't been able to been involved in any protests. I've just been like getting outside, so just getting some fresh air. But obviously, I've had the opportunity to talk to some of my friends and even my sister who've had the impact worldwide. And it's not only we've had the conversations about police brutality, but now we're having a more profound impact where we're talking about the university impact of racism and diversity. And I think it's a great opportunity for this. And not only is it a social cause worth looking forward towards to gaining awareness about, but also for social awareness for other students on campus, because as we're talking about, there's a big discrimination and towards students, and some students feel uncomfortable not only talking about some of the discrimination that they face, but also feel uncomfortable about coming to Villanova because they feel like they're gonna suffer the same consequences that previous students have in other previous years.
I guess I'm going to flip the question a little bit. So I'm going to ask Miguel, right? That's how you okay. Have you been involved in protests?
Well, personally, I haven't been outside much, as Jordan said, but I've been trying my best to support from home. Personally, I think I've been trying to help more from the Villanova side, because that's my community. That's where I live, and I know a lot of people there, care about the community, and people have seen damage to the community. And so I think, with these videos and interviews specifically, hopefully they, help, or, I'm doing something that maybe will help in the long term. But I think the most I can do right now is offer my support. I can offer empathy mostly. I think that's probably the most important thing, because obviously I don't know the struggles of a lot of people. I haven't experienced those kinds of things, but I can empathize. I can do my best to do that.
That makes sense. And I think, for me, by asking that question, I was just trying to show that, in situations like these, I think everyone who's American, everyone who lives in this country, it's everyone's responsibility to fight for justice. Whether or not you are Black or white or whatever you are, as long as we all live in this country, right? So if any one of us is being unjustly treated, we should all care about that. Yeah. And I think, again, that's something that's missing at Villanova. I think, we're all quick to say, oh no, we are a service-oriented community. We are involved in all X, Y, and Z. But when I speak about the experiences I've had as a Black woman at Villanova, all of a sudden it's silence and no one has anything to say to me. And no one wants to fight on my behalf, or no one wants to speak on my behalf. So it's, I'm hoping, at least by these videos or by other stuff that we're trying to put out, that everyone gets incentivized to get involved, because that's really what this is all about. If everyone stands up and is like, oh no, we can't, no more, then it only helps the cause better. The more people who are involved, the more people who are opposed to this kind of discrimination and injustice, then the more results we'll see for the better. And yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and I think VTB as an organization, by doing these kinds of things, and we're trying to up our social media game during the summer and try to put ourselves out there a bit more so we can have a bigger presence on campus. And I think we've talked a lot about wanting to use that presence for good. And since we have this platform, a lot of people don't have this, we have the YouTube channel, we have social media, which isn't a whole lot, but in the long run, it's worth the one or two people who listen, So we kind of discussed this a bit earlier about Villanova's demographics. Do you feel as if these demographics prevent it from being a more accessible school to minority groups, and for being able to effectively act upon the issues of racism?
So, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's like the demographics is the sole reason why it's difficult to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just isn't particularly an inclusive environment. Okay, so I think like sometimes creating an inclusive environment is not exclusively about increasing representation, because there could be a lot of representation, but it's still not an inclusive environment. So I think that's the missing piece. Because I mean, I always like to look back at my experience. So last summer I interned at McKinsey, for example, and I was interning in the Philadelphia office. And I mean, there were not that many Black people who worked in that office, particularly while I was there. I didn't see that many people, but it was an inclusive environment. I didn't even realize that I was one of the few Black people there, because they were like, I never felt any kind of isolation. I never felt singled out in any kind of way. Everyone was very like respectful, very nice, very pleasant. So I feel like sometimes, like, sure, like if there was more representation, like that could help a little bit, but it goes beyond just the demographics. I think it's a thing of like, because if we look at the demographics of Villanova, it's like, you know, predominantly white, predominantly rich, Catholic. So I think that specific demographic of people, like again, I don't want to make any generalizations, but I'm not going to assume that everyone within that demographic does not care about racial issues. Like that's not a fair statement to make at all. But I think within Villanova, there could be some, again, I haven't figured this out, but there could be some institutions in place to, you know, make it a more inclusive environment, not necessarily a more, because again, like with diversity, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just diversity. Like you could have people from all over the world in a place, but it could still not be an inclusive environment. So I think that's I guess that's how I see it.
Yeah, on that point, I feel like a lot of the times that kind of administration and kind of the higher ups, they kind of just see the problem as, oh, there's a lack of diversity. But they don't kind of take into account that no one's of color is going to want to come here if the people of color in the business or in the school in general don't feel kind of involved and included. So I feel like we need to get to kind of the root of the issue instead of just saying like, oh, we just need to recruit more. It's like you need to fix the inside before you think of bringing more people in.
Right. It's definitely the equity and inclusion piece. I think that's what's lacking. And granted, like that takes a lot more work. It requires a lot more funding. There's a lot more things that would have to go into place to actually ensure equity and inclusion. Because again, that will look different in different places. And so I think that's the piece we need to work a little bit harder on. I don't think it's necessarily the demographic.
Just to add on to that, it's not necessarily about the demographic in terms of like, yeah, it is a majority, you know, white affluent school, but and adding more Black people won't necessarily add more inclusion, or adding more students of color won't necessarily add more inclusion. It's also about, you know, students having an open heart, being open to make those connections. You know what I mean? So just because you, even if we, you know, added a diversity class or an IGR class, something along those lines, that doesn't mean that, you know, those students will actually be open-hearted to making that change. So it's also about, you know, finding people who are willing and open to make that change and, you know, be willing to be more inclusive.
So what has been your reaction to the university's response thus far? Like, would you say they're responding appropriately? And would you say, or is there more that they need to do?
In light of all that's happening, I do think that there is a renewed awareness. Like, for example, like we got an email celebrating Juneteenth and the school was closed. That's never happened before. So I mean that's great. Like that this university is recognizing that this is important. Like it's important to educate people about the significance of like that of June 19th in the history of America. Like, but again, when I think about it, like I don't really know what, like, considering where we are right now, like I don't know what the university can do right now to, like, it's not a quick fix. Like there's nothing that they can do that's gonna fix the problem and make all the problems go away. But I mean, I feel like from my perspective, I feel like they've acknowledged what's going on, and I feel like some communication could have been thought up. Like, I feel like some parts of the emails we've gotten were a little controversial and could have been a bit, could be communicated a bit better. But I applaud them for recognizing, what's going on, acknowledging the pain that a lot of people in the Black community are going through. I think it's a step in the right direction.
All right. So how has NABA as a whole like reflected on the recent events? And what have you guys been doing as an organization to reflect on these issues?
I mean, I feel like just to jump in a little again, I think for most of us who are in NABA, like it's our lived experience. Like whether or not we want to, we have to reflect on it because it directly affects us. So I mean, as an organization, like we have been reflecting on things like this because it is our reality. And again, it ties into our motto for our organization, lifting as we climb. Like we recognize that as students of color, students from like different backgrounds, we have unique obstacles on our path. And our goal is that, despite all the discrimination, despite all the, for better or worse, like racism and stuff that affects us along our journey, our goal is to make sure that as each of us rises up against all that stuff, we create the path for people to come along. And again, it's been a really difficult time for everyone. Like a lot of people need their own time to just take in all that's going on because it's an emotionally draining experience. Knowing that because I mean, when I think about it, like there is no difference. Like it could have been anybody. Do you get what I mean? Like there is no, like when things like this happen, it just brings to focus how, you at least I'm talking from my experience. It makes me feel like beyond Villanova, where everyone knows who I am, everyone knows, oh, Chi-Chi's this smart girl. She interned there and there and that. Like when I'm just walking on the streets of America, I'm just another Black body. And so like that's something each of us is grappling with on our own. And so I feel like as an organization, we're giving people the space to, reflect, at least be in community with people who can understand that experience. Because I think during this time, it's difficult to have this conversation over and over again. Like, oh, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? It's just knowing that, like, I could see someone and they know exactly what I'm going through. And if we just, like, give each other a hug or something, like, we're going to get through this somehow. I think within VSB, that is kind of what one of our goals is, to create that social backbone. Because, again, it's our reality. There isn't really any, like, extra reflection or extra anything that we could really do during this time. It's just kind of like upsetting. I don't know.
Yeah, going off of Chi-Chi's point, I definitely agree. As people of color, we always have these conversations because it's our experience, and this is kind of what we bond over, sadly, and being a part of NABA and groups like this. And especially during this time, NABA wants to kind of open up dialogue, like I was saying before, to not only have these conversations with people of color, but have these conversations with our fellow white students. So we are working on having a forum in the summer where our organization and other VSB organizations can kind of have an open dialogue and talk about these things before we go on campus. So everyone kind of can have a chance to engage in these uncomfortable conversations, because I feel like a lot of times we're always the ones who feel uncomfortable in situations, and yet a lot of times we're kind of making ourselves uncomfortable to make other people comfortable. And I feel like when you flip the side, it kind of will have people reflecting on themselves and reflecting like why these things make them uncomfortable. So we're definitely working on that, and definitely hoping that other organizations are open to it. And yeah.
Great. So to wrap it up, the final question, considering the entire Villanova community, including students, faculty, the administration. What are some things that we can all do to ensure a more inclusive environment at Villanova?
I think one thing, it's like people need to educate themselves. Like, people need to be able, because I think there is a missing history in the history of America. There is a history that people aren't taught in high school or in like middle school, whatever, and people need to be aware of that history so that they understand how they show up in society. Like, they understand how some statements could be offensive. Because I think, again, I'm not defending anyone, but I think sometimes some people's ignorance is born out of like a lack of education. Like, they don't know. But again, it should not, the onus of teaching people should not be on the students of color. It should be your personal responsibility as a citizen of America to educate. Like, how can I educate myself so I can be a better and more socially conscious person, and I could communicate better with people from different backgrounds. So I think that's definitely the first, like, one easy fix. Like, make it compulsory for there to be some sort of like set of classes where every person who goes to this college has to take these classes so that they, when they graduate from here, they are better, like they're kind of like, they're awakened somehow, like they're more aware of what's actually going on in society.
Yeah, just to build off that, just, and, our white counterparts have to want, to be, want to be educated, want to be, want to be open-hearted. And like, we can't, our organization and other minority organizations can't be the only ones who are, reaching out and try to, kind of build that bridge. We need, those other organizations to kind of reach out to us also in order to make this environment more inclusive and, and not just, be more diverse.
I think another thing is, I think just being open to kind of new experiences and being friends with people who don't look like you. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of the same demographic of people come to Villanova, and that's all they ever know, and that's what they tend to stick to. And I feel like it's always the people of color who get left out, because let's say in my orientation group, I was probably one of two people of color, and yet me and that other person, we were like so close, and yet I don't speak to anyone else, and no one else speaks to me. And I feel like that's basically how like Villanova is. Like, you stick to your groups, and then people don't even notice how we get left out. Like in class, when we get into like group projects and there's 3 people sitting next to you and you're the one left out, and it's like, you couldn't take the time to kind of ask me or include me. Like, I feel like it's more awareness and more being open to kind of seeing things like how they are and not just being in your own bubble. I think that would really benefit just the inclusivity of Villanova, just being open to kind of learning about our experiences, not just having these microaggressions thrown at us, but actually being curious to know about our history and know about our backgrounds.
Yeah, I think too, just being intentional about like building relationships with people, like Maria said, like being open. I again, like for me, I came to this country and I did not know anybody. So I feel like in order for me to, get the most out of my experience, I had to open up and like be intentional about building relationships from people who are very different from me, who have had very, very different life experiences than I have. So like, again, like I've had such a fantastic, I think I've definitely grown so much in just allowing myself to take in other stuff that are just different from mine. So I don't, like, there's only value to be added by opening up your heart to experiencing something that's different from you. And I think a lot of that's just missing at Villanova. People, frankly, just don't care. Like, they are comfortable in their own spaces, in their own bubbles, and everything else that's happening beyond that is really not their business. And I think that's what needs to be changed. If someone who is a Villanovan, who is an American, or who is living in this country is going through some undue injustice or discrimination, it should all be our problem. Like, we should all care about that, because, everyone sings in the national anthem together. Everyone, like, we all say like, oh, like, this is our country, whatever. Like, people should care about that and like take that seriously when they say those words.
All right. And so are there any like closing remarks or anything that anything else that you would like to get out to the Villanova community or that you think would be beneficial for people to hear?
I think finally, Villanova, we pride ourselves on being like unitas, veritas, caritas. If we really want to live by those words, like, this is your problem too. If the Villanovan is, going through a tough time, not because of anything else beyond what they look like, that's your problem to fix that. Because, if you say you're a Villanovan, like go Cats, like you are like, like it is your problem and you should do whatever it is within your power to change that. Because again, like we always say, ignite change. Like this is our chance to do that.
So actions speak louder than words. I think it's one thing to just say that you care and say and post on social media, but it's one thing to actually go out of your way and try to make a change, even though you don't look like that person or you don't share that same experience. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together, and that's what I want to see. I want to see action when I come back to campus. I don't want to hear words. I don't want to kind of just hear the same thing over and over again. I want there to be some action and some form of change that takes place.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hopefully, a lot of people will hear you guys and listen, and maybe they'll learn a thing or two. I know I definitely got the chance to think about a couple more perspectives that I hadn't really considered before. So thank you guys so much for that. This is National Association for Black Accountants. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.